The likelihood ratios for the victim and suspect reference swabs, the cutout from the shirt blood stain, and the cutout from the pants semen stain are all relatively large because they only had a single source contributing DNA. The cigarette has a slightly lower likelihood ratio, however, possibly due to poor sample quality. The remaining exhibits all had mixed sources of DNA, so their likelihood ratios are somewhat lower again. This result is supported by the US National Research Council on DNA Forensic Science. These uncertainties make the interpretation more complex, but cannot be ignored when addressing the following.
Body fluids were found on some exhibits. Presumptive and confirmatory tests were conducted on the victim's pants and suspect's shirt for semen and blood respectively, and all returned positive results. Other fluids may have existed on other exhibits, but the relevant tests were not conducted, so it cannot be known for certain whether the DNA found on them was from a body fluid or just. The victim's DNA was recovered as part of the vaginal swab from the mobile phone, in the bloodstains on the suspect's shirt, and the buccal reference swab provided by the victim. The suspect's DNA was recovered from the lip of the drink bottle, the filter of the cigarette butt, the mobile phone, the inside of the crotch of the victim's pants, as part of the vaginal swab taken from the victim, and on the buccal reference swab provided by the. In relation to the following questions, statements cannot be made regarding the activity level of how either the victim's or the suspect's DNA arose on the other person, as such evaluations fall beyond the reach of the current available evidence and information. The suspect cannot be excluded as the source of the DNA found on the victim's phone. The evidence is 30.2 times more likely, 55.9 times more likely, and 303.4 times more likely if the suspect is the source than if a random member of the Aboriginal, Asian, or European Australian populations is the source, respectively. It was confirmed that blood was present on the suspect's shirt, and the victim cannot be excluded as being its source. This DNA evidence is 1.7 times 10 to the 20 times more likely, 2.5 times 10 to the 22 times more likely, and 7.5 times 10 to the 18 times more likely if the suspect is the source than if a random member of the Aboriginal Australian, Asian Australian, or European Australian populations is the source. The suspect cannot be excluded as the source of the DNA found on the drink bottle. This evidence is 2.5 times 10 to the 5 times more likely, 1.2 times 10 to the 6 times more likely, and 3.9 times 10 to the 6 times more likely if the suspect is the source than if a random member of the Aboriginal, Asian, or European Australian populations is